this one. Can I click from so peaky and this guy?
Slide over a little bit. Okay.
Oh, so we're gonna use one. All over it. Can we put this one off? No, this is A.
Are you ready? Because we're live now.
Yes, I was sick.
I had to fire my film.
I thought you were gonna sit there.
No. I
said,
sorry. No, I pointed these out when we started. So, okay. All right.
I'm gonna first see my framing because I have this.
Yeah. Okay. And we're going to be looking at that camera. So this is the one that's live. So. Okay.
I'm gonna have a problem.
Good.
Yeah, but I'm gonna move. I'll see what I can do. Don't worry, I'm gonna find.
Push that one to start. Okay. We're live on there, right? Anybody show up yet? Because it's unannounced.
Yeah, it's running now for a minute.
Okay, good to go. All right, you ready?
There's 2 likes.
Oh, we haven't even said anything. That's good news.
Just over sick. Good. Just see if that's space contrast. It's time for people to come in line. And action.
Hey folks, welcome back to Chris Wyatt Reports. This is Chris in Wellington in the Western Cape of South Africa. You know, I've been walking around this week and people said, you're a big oak. I don't know about that. This gentleman next to me here, he's got me beat. Schalk Senior, sir. Hoe
Gaan baie goed, dankie. And welcome here at Welbedacht.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Well, let's start with that, okay? Welbedacht, what does that mean?
Welbedacht is a High Dutch word when the farm was granted. Originally, this farm was granted in the early 1800s. It was actually part of a bigger farm, and the guy who demarcated this area called it Welbedacht, which means well thought out.
So he had a good plan, obviously.
Yeah, it's actually quite an interesting story. Is this guy, he got granted this piece of land by his father-in-law, and the bigger piece of land was Driefontein, which means 3 fountains.
3 fountains, yes.
So, and then when he went and his father-in-law said, go and look for a piece of land, and he came back every time, and within the big chart, he selected this piece. So the father-in-law said, well, we've got to go to the governor if we want to demarcate something else here. Use at least 2 boundaries. And this guy went away, and after 4 years, he every time came back with the same piece of land. And when this piece of land was granted, he had to name it. Then he named it Welbedacht. So obviously, he must have taken his time thinking about it.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Well, the name has stood the test of time. It's still called that.
Yeah.
Now, how long have you been in possession of this wine?
I bought this farm in 1998. I bought the name farm in 95, and I bought this one. And unluckily, it didn't look like it looks like today. That was stroke and distance and counting, to use a golf term, because we had to redo the whole manor house, and then I started building. And I built a cricket ground over there, and a clubhouse, and the cellar. And
so you poured a lot of capital into it.
Yeah, no, a lot.
Did you merge the 2 farms, since you said you bought one next to this?
Yeah. They merged, and you know, with me building the cellar, I wanted to build something unique, and we built a very nice cellar. I always say I built the cellar to suit my fruit. You know, so we've got open fermenters and basket press and stuff for the red wines. So it's been a bit of living your dreams out, type of operation.
Well, that sort of dream. Did you grow up on a farm, or was it something that came to you later?
I grew up at a farm. My dad never owned it. He like rented the farm. He was more a weekend farmer because he was doing other businesses as well. And later on in life, you know, I sold a business or 2 and got some money. And then, you know, if you've got money, you've got to spend it. That's what I thought.
Is that the secret? Okay. I thought you were supposed to collect it.
Yeah, I was, you know, later in life, you realize you made mistakes and so. So yeah, it's a family concern. So it's actually owned by the family trust, and hopefully my kids, when I die one day, you know, I never want to rule from out of the grave, but maybe they'll take it on, you know, and let the following generations live themselves out there on the farm.
Well, you mentioned family and family trust. Of course, you've. If I get this wrong, miss any kids, you let me know. I know you've got Schalk Jr. You've got Talon, and Renee is also. Any other children? I miss any?
No, that's my 3 children. Then I've got 5 grandchildren.
Ooh, okay.
So, in Afrikaans we called Opa.
Yeah, yeah.
My grandfather's an Opa. So I'm an Opa. And I always joke with my friends, I say that, these days I'm sleeping with an Oma. I wake up in the mornings with an Oma in the bed, a grandmother in the bed.
Never thought you'd say that, did you, when you were a young man?
No, never.
Well, if I understand, Tion works here on the farm, yes?
Yes, Talon looks after the vineyard and the cellar. The winemaker reports to him. And he lives like 15, 20 yards left in actually the oldest house on this farm, which they started building in 1780, which we redone. When we got here, there were cows and stuff. It was like a shed, and
Bit of work to be done.
Yeah, we did it quite nicely.
So the estate, your estate says Schalk and Sons. Now we see him on Supersport a lot, commenting these days. Does Schalk Jr. also play a role? Does he pop in occasionally?
He pops in occasionally.
Okay, just checking. He's getting credit for the Sons. That's why I'm asking.
Now look, the interesting thing is, being well known and quite busy on television. Everybody says to me, but Schalk, because he will say that we've got a farm. The wine farm belongs to them, and everybody says to me, "What does he do?" I said, "I don't know." They say, "How can you say that? He hasn't applied for a job yet." So I don't know.
Well, there goes my opportunity to interview Schalk Jr. I've just outed him.
No, look, he's an integral part of the trust, even his sister and his brother and so forth. And he lives in Cape Town, and post rugby, he's got his property business with the dear friend that he's running, and he's also doing punditry on Supersport.
He is. I've caught him on Supersport. I do color commentary and play-by-play of the games on social media, and I've caught him during halftime. So interesting. He's doing a good job. They've got him and Jean de Villiers out there doing that stuff. So interesting stuff. Well, so you kind of grew up on a farm. What kind of farm was that? Was it cattle, and what part of the country was that in? Was it in the high veld or down here?
That was in a little area called Coast River. My father was doing like vegetables, and my job there as a young kid up to the age of 6, 7 that we were on the farm was to try and control the moles. Because in the sand there was. Did that
involve a rifle or shotgun?
No. I used to dig holes and put in traps, and because there's nothing worse than my dad having this hell of a nice patch of carrots, and you pull the carrots out and then they're half done out.
It's funny now, but it wasn't when you were a child.
No, it wasn't. So I used to be paid per mole. So every morning before school, I used to go and look at all the various holes that we had and how many moles I caught. But what Dad didn't know, I was the moles that I was catching, I was selling to the labourers because they used to eat the moles.
So we're making double income. Oh, that's smart. You were clever. So of course, for those who, I think most people know, but there may be some my international audience who don't know that you're also a rugby player. Did play for the Springboks as well. How did you get into rugby? Was it from the very beginning of youth, or something you walked into later?
No, look, it's an interesting story. All I wanted to do, and I built this wonderful cricket ground clubhouse here on my farm. My first love has always been cricket.
No, don't say that. Don't say that.
But I'll tell you now what happened. And so what happened was when I was about like 9, 10 years at primary school, I asked my mom why will my dad not allow me to play cricket? So he said, ask him. So one day in tears, I asked him, why can I not play cricket? And he said to me, well, you'll one day find out what the English did to your forefathers. Ooh. You understand? So,
yeah, I do understand.
So that was very much a Boer Afrikaner issue. And that's how I got, as a 10-year-old, I had the biggest suitcase in my class. Because the only way my mom could get my cricket clothes and my books.
So your mom helped you?
Yeah, in one
So
case.
You did play cricket?
So I did play cricket. But I was a very bad asthmatic. I was very bad asthmatic, just like my son Schalk said. Very people don't know that. And I grew it when I was 13. But those days, they didn't have all the medicine that you've got today. And I think I was overdosed by this one doctor. We had these little rubber pumps, and you had to pour stuff in the top and get it spraying. And
kind of dodgy, wasn't it?
Yeah, and my chest would close up, and I would be running around, wheezing like hell, until later some of my mates used to say they're scared I'm going to die, then I'll go off and I'll pop myself and I'll start running again. And then what happened was during high school, I played provincial rugby. I was also a provincial athlete. And all I wanted to do was design Formula One racing cars. So I had applied to Birmingham School of Design to go and do motor vehicle design and racing car design.
So like McLaren does that sort of thing.
Yeah, and the big thing at that stage was they actually wanted you to have some experience of Formula One. And there was a South African, Jody Scheckter, who was racing at that stage for Tyrrell. And we applied to Ken Tyrrell, me and my brother, and it was a year after me, and we got accepted to go and work just as deckhands. So then, when I was in my final year at school, my brother was here behind me. He said, well, why don't you go do army first? And then I'll finish up school, and then the two of us go together. So I said, well, fantastic, because we had conscription.
Yes.
So I went to the army, and then at the age of 18, I started playing senior Currie Cup rugby. For Northwestern Cape. I was right up in Uppington there on the,
I've been to Uppington.
Kalahari, yeah.
It's like Botswana. It's hot.
we built the bloody camp there. And then I had this phone call in September from Dr. Craven. I didn't even really know
Danny
much.
Craven.
Yeah. And he said to me, what are you doing next year? And I said, well, I'm going to England. What are you going to do there? And I'd just been selected in the first primary trials for the South African under-21 rugby side. That went to the following year to tour in South America. And I said, I'm going to the UK. So what are you going to do there? I said, I'm going to go and design cars. And he said, cars? You're a rugby player. Rugby players don't design cars. You see that you get to Stellenbosch.
Oh, Danny Craven, I love it.
And that's how I got to Stellenbosch. So then playing for Stellenbosch and playing for Western Province. And so it went up. The height of isolation, I eventually got my Springbok colours. Me and my son were the 8th father and son combination to father and son to play for South Africa. But then obviously our years with the terrible years of isolation, But quite a high point was I was selected for the World 15 in 1986 as part of the centenary celebrations of rugby, So that was my rugby side.
Well, you played for Marcus, didn't you?
Yeah, I played for University of South Africa. So.
Yeah.
Can I go, mate? I just want to change my glasses.
Okay.
The distance is different. I cannot see a thing. Just hold.
It's our film crew, folks. Don't swipe that. We're still live here with you. So, Schalk, I mean, that's an interesting. He wants me to wait for that. But, okay, the live audience, can you bear with us a moment while we're making some technical changes here? We're gonna have to send him for Lasix because he's having trouble.
I forgot we're using only once. I have to put on one. But it's still okay. I can save that in audio. Don't want to take the risk. See.
It'll be worth it, Schalk. When he's really good at editing. Occasional snafu when we're doing interviews, but the editing is incredible. It's hard to beat it. Are we ready now? Are we back?
Oh, we're back.
We're back.
Prachtig.
Okay. Wait. Okay. All right. So Schalk, yeah. So you want to design cars. Danny Craven convinced you to stay with rugby, and just kind of went for it. I think you got what 6 tests as a Springbok, yes?
I had 6 tests. At that period of time, for 2-3 year periods, there were no tests.
Yeah, just a gap there.
And then from 86 to 92, there was only one, but it was like a South Sea Bavarian side. So if you think, in 6 years having no tests, these days the guys are playing between 10 and 13, 14 tests.
Every season. Plus they're playing professional rugby all season too.
How many people could have played for South Africa and couldn't just because of the isolation, What was sad to us was, in 86 when we beat the New Zealanders here, we all knew that next year was going to be the first Rugby World Cup, 1987. And there were stories that, yes, we could maybe go because it's a PTY that was controlling Rugby World Cup and not the IRB, International Rugby Board. So a lot of us sort of like hung in because we thought
you might get
fantastic, and go to the World Cup. But then we weren't. And the 13 of the guys that we had beaten here in South Africa actually went and won the first World Cup. So it was like a bittersweet type of.
Yeah, but the good news is the All Blacks had a very long gap between that victory and another one. But now they're even with the Springboks, 3 World Cups apiece. And here we're coming up in France this year. Do you still follow the Boks? I mean, you pay close attention to them?
Yeah, obviously, having had a business where I did all the commercialization rugby, little
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
television rights and marketing rights and stuff like that. So I get a lot of the leading administrators still come here. Though problems with Western Province, guys came here and they wanted me to help them. And
Well, their big problem is money, I think.
Yeah, money and ears.
Oh, there you go.
Money and ears. They don't listen so nicely, you know. And
I've said that on my broadcast before, but that's just me.
yeah, no, they don't listen, and the opportunities have been there, and they haven't taken it, and it's sad, you know. And especially going away from Newlands. I mean, Newlands was built in our days where we won the Currie Cup for 5 years in a row, but we were amateur, and that's why the unions could make money to build these stadiums, you know. Now that's like our heritage there. You know, we didn't make money at that stage.
Well, there's still an effort to save Newlands because it was supposed to be demolished already. I don't know if the hell that's going. I haven't. Kept
Yeah,
up on
look,
it.
I think, you know, Vernon Carson's busy trying to have it registered as a
Historical?
heritage site. Yeah. So no, look, it's I do follow the rugby, and you know, obviously not as close as when my son Schalk was still playing.
Sure.
And you know, he played right up until 2019 when he said the hardware started falling apart. The software was still okay, but when he tore his hamstring, then he decided to quit. So I'm not that avid, you know, because I work hard and I'm around a lot of other places now. I help with a lot of NGO type of business, and especially with the Afrikaans language. You know, we're trying to promote it and so forth, which I believe is important for South Africa. But you know, having played rugby for that long and coached and commercialised, you know, it's a bit sad that we aren't really on the forefront. But I think what's happened this year, a lot of teams are going through funny phases. I think it's going to be very open 2023 World Cup.
Well, what's even stranger is some teams, well, you're talking about the national sides, but I was just thinking of the URC, the United Rugby Championship. What's weird about that is that the South African sides, one day they're giant kills, the next day they're just little guppies. I mean, the Stormers played terrible last week, and then they just destroyed the Sharks yesterday. Completely different performance. And even in games with the Stormers, I'm a huge Stormers fan. You watch them, they'll have a bad first half, a great second half, or a great first half, and they just hang on. It's kind of inconsistent. It's the same way at the national sides. You look at England has been inconsistent. France is the only one that's been consistent. I suppose you could say they're the front runners now, but they always choke in the World Cup, so we'll see how that goes. We'll see if they can do it at home. And then the other one that's been pretty consistent is Ireland, but on any given day, people can beat Ireland. So I think the big
Well,
question
you
is
know, if you
Springboks.
get the ball behind the Irish, they're vulnerable, and also why. You know, I think one of the issues. I was chatting to Pat Simcox this morning. You know, who's an Italian and a big Schalk supporter, and he was livid because he says, you know, he buys these golden tickets to go to, and then they change, and they drop 11 guys out of the team because they say they've got arrested. He says, well, it's a home game.
Yeah.
He says, let's just work this out. He
You
says,
don't
I'm a
lose in your
supporter.
home turf like that.
I want, you know, I go there to see the best team play. Now, like on Saturday, even Itzebeth got married. Now, nowadays I was saying to you, there's no ways that you got married in the rugby season. You know, you would have been dropped out.
Where are your priorities at?
You know what I'm saying?
I'm sure his wife doesn't want to hear that.
So obviously they're playing 12 months of the year, but like I was saying to Pat, that even then you get married very early in the morning, that you can play in the afternoon.
That's right.
Or you get married on a Thursday and you're not practicing.
Exactly.
Yeah? So that just shows you how things have changed.
No, they have, and the professional area really has changed, particularly of late. I think one of the big developments, of course, we see is with the South African sides leaving Super Rugby and playing in Europe, and a lot of people question whether that was viable. Of course, the Cheetahs and the Southern Kings gave it a shot for a few years. The Cheetahs did okay, Kings not so well. So I think they did the proof of concept that South African sides could play with the European sides. And then last year, the Bulls and the Stormers in the final. That was incredible. The only disappointing thing is that the government limited the number of people in the stadium for the final. But other than that, it was incredible.
Yeah, look, I mean, you know, the contradiction of decisions. You know, one of the big issues of going to the Northern Hemisphere is the debate about an overnight flight.
Yes.
But now what happens, the South African teams are flying via Dubai.
Which is even worse.
Have you seen, and they've got long layovers,
Yes,
and
I
they're
know.
flying economy class.
I know.
Now, where does SA Rugby come in? Then you could just as well be flying again to Australia or whatever.
It's actually quicker to fly to Australia. It's only 12 hours. If you fly to Dubai, it's a longer flight.
And I believe they're staying in crummy hotels and beds that are too short for these tall locks of today. So somehow it just shows you, I honestly believe you're only as good on the field as what you are off the field. And that's a very important thing, so your management and everything. So I think, I don't know. I hear it's SA Rugby that took these decisions with sponsors and stuff, but it's absurd.
Well, it's a point I've made quite a bit past few years. There was talk a couple of years ago, before the pandemic came along, of expanding from 20 to 24 teams in the World Cup. And my position was that's ludicrous because you have a lot of rugby unions that are financial distress. For instance, Zimbabwe went to Tunisia to qualify. They slept rough. They threw them out of their hotel. They're sleeping on the streets.
Yeah.
That's not going to work. USA Rugby, bankrupt. The only reason the Springboks came to play Wales in DC in our terrible stadium, RFK, looks like a third-world stadium. We have a brand new one. But they played there was for the paycheck because they got $750,000 guaranteed, which of course is part of the reason why USA Rugby went bankrupt because they paid for that.
I can just think about it, Joe.
But I mean, you can't expand a World Cup when you have rugby unions around the world that are struggling just to break even and pay for their players. It's crazy. So let me ask you this. Any predictions for 2023? Who's going to win it in France?
Well,
I'll put you on the spot here.
No, look, the pools, South Africa's in a really strong pool.
Yes.
And it's going to be very interesting how the pools play out. Because already there are people trying to work out quarter and semi-finals and whatever. Because it's so absurd because, with all this fraud that's been taking place in the French Rugby Union and Bernard
resigning.
Laporte and even Altrat was found guilty, and he's the sponsor of France and New Zealand, Mohamed Altrat. If you actually look at it, I think the major teams are going to come through. It'll be South Africa. I'm not certain about England getting through, but
I don't think so.
So France, New Zealand will be there, but France is always the bogus bogey. So wherever they end up, and then you've got Ireland, and the way Scotland was playing yesterday was just phenomenal.
I picked Scotland to beat England yesterday in Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I won. I picked Ireland. I picked Scotland. There you go.
Well, all those Afrikaners there. I mean,
Well,
those, and Mac van der Merwe and Mac Steyn.
Josh van der Vlier, players like that,
Great try that Deon van der Merwe scored. I mean, absolutely brilliant solo effort. So I don't think there can be really too many upsets. Welsh rugby,
they're dead.
They're dead and gone. And I think England, what I can't understand, just out of my side of being the commercial side of rugby and so, how could Eddie Jones never have had a restraint of trade at England? Because now he's the Aussie coach. So they're going to have to change everything.
Yep.
And all his plans, because whenever he's lost or whatever, he's, I'm working towards World Cup. That's, every coach's forward throw if he's got a bit of a problem. Until they found him out, just ship out. But that he didn't have a restraint of trade. I mean, and he got a payoff. And that must be crazy, so now how do you change it? How do you change the players and everything? So I think England's going to battle to be on song.
I think so. And if World Rugby pays a little bit closer attention to officiating, England's going to be in a lot of trouble. They've been tackling, but we won't get into that. That's a whole other subject.
Let's not talk about referees.
Yeah, let's not do that. So let me shift gears a little bit before we wrap up here, Schalk. A couple more things. I want to come back to the wine at the end, but Burger. Sounds like a German name. A little history to that name?
Yeah, there was the first burger in this country actually came from Hamburg.
Okay.
In 1690.
So he was a Hamburger.
I think that's where hamburgers came from.
In fact, they did.
The burger from Hamburg.
They did.
Hamburg. So basically a Bucher that became a burger. Many of them changed their names here. So I'm 10th generation South African. My grandchildren are 12th generation South African. So, we've got some politicians here that say European imperialists. I mean, some of them can't prove that they've been in South Africa for 10 generations, not even 5 generations, So South Africa is where we are. I'm Schalk Willem Petersburger. I'm the 6th generation of that. And my son and my grandson got the same names, SWP, because the eldest son gets the grandfather's name. So it's just in that rolling factor going down. And so that's where the burgers have been.
So quite a while, quite a long history here.
Yeah.
But that's so Germans, like many Germans who came here and assimilated, became part of the Afrikaans community, Afrikaners.
Yeah, look, the interesting thing about this farm of ours is the oldest Afrikaans school is on the farm here.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
So like an old one-room schoolhouse sort of thing?
yeah, the two little.
You guys must have been rich. We could only afford one-room schoolhouse in America.
It was one and it was extended.
Oh, it was extended. Okay.
And it was built in 1866. And prior to that, in farms, the kids actually didn't go to school.
Yes.
But the father, there was this movement, the Genootskap of Recht Afrikaners, the Association of Real Afrikaners. And they were formed in January of 1875. And their main reason for forming was to actually get the Bible translated into Afrikaans. They didn't want to have a Dutch Bible or English Bible. And just remember about 20 years after that, with the Boer War taking place, that was more the republics against England, the Free State and Transvaal. But then, after a few months of working around how we're going to get this, I said, but nothing's been printed in Afrikaans. So what they did is, funny, I've got a patriot thing, and the first Afrikaans printed matter was called Die Patriot, the Patriot.
Yes.
And so the first chairman of the Association of Real Afrikaners was C.P. Hoognout, and the principal of the school was C.P. Hoognout, the same guy, and he also became the editor. So at that stage, Afrikaans wasn't really a language that
it wasn't considered a language yet.
Because it was more a kitchen language.
Patois.
Yeah. And so what was very interesting of this whole thing was that they tried to get something printed, but nobody would allow, all the printing presses were controlled by the English, and there was one press controlled by the Dutch, and they were printing the Zuid-Afrikaan. So there was a guy, Jan Hofmeyer, who brought in a printing press from the UK just for the Patriot. And I've still got a copy of all the first 12 editions.
Wow.
And just in there, you can see how the language started changing, the IJ becoming a long Y and stuff like that. So it's a very long history, here. And interestingly enough, Afrikaans only became an official language in 1925. It took them 50 years. And the Bible, which was the original reason for forming the Genootskap van Recht Afrikaners, was only first published in 1933, which is 50
years. Took even longer.
Yeah.
Wow.
The interesting thing about Afrikaans, and just we're on Afrikaans, it's one of only 5 languages that in the first 100 years of it being an official language became a full academic language. So you've got Afrikaans, Hebrew, Malaysian, Singaporean, I don't know what the first one is now. So it's a very proud history, and I'm a proud Afrikaner.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. What I do on my program is I promote some South African culture and languages, particularly. The 3 languages I focus on are Afrikaans, Setswana, or Tswana in South Africa, and then Sotho. Of course, they're cousins, Sotho and Setswana. So yeah, nothing wrong with that at all. So speaking of that, the only language in the world that has a monument dedicated to it is Afrikaans, and that's located not too far away from here in Paarl. Originally, I scheduled my trip to go to a concert at Paarl, and that was with Steve Hofmeyer. But today, we're here at Welbedacht because that's where the concert's at. Thank you for allowing it to take place here.
Yeah, look, I've got quite a long history in the Afrikaans culture, in that I was one of the longest serving directors of the Frankfurt Kunstfest, the biggest Afrikaans cultural festival. And I was also chairman, and I did a lot of things, got it sponsored and so forth. So I've come quite a long way with Steve, and that, him being there, not being there, and all the various problems that we've had in this country. We have got one major problem in our country at this point in time, is that people are trying to really force certain ideological ideas down to people, and there's no leadership. So, which should have been a great concert in the Paarl Monument, all of a sudden there's a guy called Michael Jonas, and who decided he doesn't want Steve there. They've done all the right stuff, Steve and his promoters.
Well, they had a contract and everything, if I'm not mistaken.
Everything there, and then they started to try and get them to not appear. And that's where I came in. I just said, listen, forget this. Now, I don't think I haven't received a lot of threats and all kinds of stuff have been pushed my way. But I've been through this with Bob van Black and De La Rey and Fokko Polisikar, that other band. So I've handled this around, and to me it's just important, freedom of speech, you know, and what's happening in South Africa, if I don't agree with you and I've got a different opinion, people are seeing that as that I'm like against you, or, you know,
It's juvenile.
and that's what's happening, and so good debates, and these last night's show was so fantastic, and it was just like a peace, and the people enjoyed themselves all around the language. It was great to see.
No, a lot of people, of course, outside South Africa don't realize that the majority of folks who speak Afrikaans are actually Cape colored folks. That's the largest percentage of people who speak the language. It's spoken by many South Africans. It's the second most widely spoken second language in the country, I think.
Well, it's spoken, but it's most probably the widest understood language.
That's probably a fair statement too.
You know, it's the lingua franca in
It is.
Namibia,
and not just in South Africa. Namibia, also Botswana can speak.
Botswana.
Yeah.
And especially, you know, if you think how it originated, you know, there were two language movements and what they had to go through, and the Dutch really tried to strangle the locals from moving away from Dutch, and then obviously we also had the French Huguenots that we have. So by far, it's the most understood language, I think, in South Africa.
All right, so let's go ahead and get back to the wine, then we'll wrap up. You've been very generous with your time. I want to thank you for that, but you seem to enjoy the conversation. So let's get back to the wine. So here at Welbedacht, is there a speciality? Is there something you focus on? Like some vineyards over on the other side, they focus on Cape Shiraz and things like that.
Yeah, we've got quite a few cultivars here on the farm, and we've got some beautiful old vineyards, you know, like Chenin Blanc, you know, which we call Steen, it's the old Afrikaans name, and the Springbok, and Pinotage. We've got a lot of Pinotage. Our soils, you see, the soils that there's a wonderful mountain just behind me called Groenberg.
Green Mountain.
The Green Mountain, because the Dutch weren't very good with naming stuff. Whatever they saw.
Not very original, were they?
You know why it's Groenberg? Because the mountain is green.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
you know,
that's
Paul,
how I found your estate, because I saw that it was near Groenberg. I'm like, okay, that must be it.
But Paul is the biggest rock extrusion in South Africa.
It looks like a pearl.
Yeah, and it was in the winter, and it was
Like
wet,
white.
and the sun was shining on, and it was shining, and the parel, P-A-R, it's a pearl.
Pearl, yes.
So like Klapmans, it looks like the old mitts.
They were pretty basic, were the Dutch.
Very, very basic. But what's interesting is that there are four mountains like Paarlman, Paardenberg, and over there you've got Kasteelberg. They were formed about 250 million years ago. You know, obviously Gondwana land split about 550 million years ago. And obviously sometimes when I do wine tastings, there are ministers that say this guy's from the devil. It's because I believe in the fact that we are busy with the sixth extinction of the world. The world has been 5 times extinct with hot, cold phases, because you just have to look at paleontology and stuff like that. And why Groenberg is so unique, it's the best decomposed granite resource that we've got in South Africa, because it's the closest to the regional source, which is the Limit Mountains in the back. That's nothing wrong. That's Limitberg.
As far as
That's the limit. It's the
as
limit.
far as I can see.
They couldn't go farther than that, the Limitberg. You know? But in any case, so with regards to that, our soils are not very fertile. We very much like Saint-Emilion, that type of areas, the western side, the eastern side of the Gironde River, you know, in Bordeaux. So we do very good Shiraz, we do very nice blends. We've got unique names. We've got like the Meerkat range.
You have a Meerkat range. Okay.
Yeah, and the reason for the Meerkat, I always wanted to be the first guy to use the word gregarious on the label, because I believe it's a wonderful word on the label. Except that all my Afrikaans mates are cheap as Schalk. What the hell, gregarious? So on my back of my label, I've got the Oxford Dictionary definition: fond of company, living in flocks or communities. And there is no more gregarious animal than the meerkat.
No, not at all. Good
Until
point.
all my mates say to you, you must realize in the meerkat community, it's a total maternalistic.
It is. Yeah, the matriarch runs it all.
She runs it all. And they all don't want to drink wine. I said, well, what's different in real life? And I said, okay, let's go on. But, you know, so we've got a cricket pitch, but our top is a blend, top wine, most expensive wine is a blend of 6 cultivars, and we call it number 6. And the interesting about that was,
I assume that was because it's a position of flanker.
now, me, although it doesn't look like it. Me and my son Tian, and obviously my son Schalk, all played rugby, provincial rugby, in the number 6 jersey. Schalk went further and became Rugby Player of the Year in the world in the number 6 jersey, and personified number 6. Although many people thought he was number 9. Because he was so many times upside down.
Well, he's diving in there on the ruck trying to get the ball.
The guys were so many times. They actually thought that team had 2 scrum halves, 2 number 9s, but in any case. And it's got 6 cultivars. We started out just only 6 barrels. And from there, every time we've made it, it's been a multiple of 6 barrels, so our number 6. And yeah, you know, it's been tough. COVID, we're the only wine industry that was closed down during COVID. For what reason, we still haven't.
Well, there's some crazy decisions there. You don't have to comment if you don't want, but I covered the wine industry earlier when the COVID started. And one of the dumbest things from my perspective was that they stopped the transport of wine. And the reason that matters is because your export market is so important in South Africa. And if you are a wholesaler abroad in Europe or in the United States, and you have a supplier that suddenly becomes unreliable, what do? You turn to Chile, you turn to Australia, you look for alternatives. And then when the South Africans come back to the market, there may not be a shelf space for them.
You see, this is what happened. You know, we weren't allowed to export. Then we were allowed to export. And the first guy's trucks on the road got stopped because we weren't allowed to transport.
Exactly.
I believe for 2 months, we were allowed to export, and we couldn't transport.
But you can get the port.
So we were asking, can we fly by helicopter or something? But I mean, this minister is so, let's leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that. But no, that was just absolutely crazy. I did a lot of coverage of the wine industry. Look, wine is okay. I'm a fan of wine. I'm not a wine aficionado, but I am a fan of people having liberty and freedom and opportunity to pursue their dream and to make a living and employ others. And the draconian actions that took place here in South Africa were really devastating to so many industries, the tourism industry and the wine industry. And that's why I covered it so much, because I hated to see that happen in South Africa.
And look, we also at a guest house in town, we closed the restaurant here on the farm, because you had to. The guest houses were closed for 13, 14 months.
And all those people didn't have a job.
No, it was terrible. And it was just so draconian, and they didn't answer us. You know, I led the whole wine industry's fight against the government. But then we used to get policemen rocking up here with the Johannesburg number plate and stuff like this. And the guy will come to me and say, Mr. Burger, please, can I taste some wine? I've come all the way from Johannesburg, 1,400 kilometers. And I said, no, I'm not going to give it to you. But I don't want to buy. Just let me taste some wine. I said, and I said to this one guy, there are 2 reasons why I'm not going to do it. He said, what? I said, first, you called me Mr. Burger. And then your shoes. I said, I'm telling you, you're a policeman. The guy turned around and walked away. You could see it.
You might have done better if he said Minier.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Schalk Burger, you've been very generous with your time. It's a distinct pleasure and a privilege to get to meet you finally and chat. So I want to thank you. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with anybody about maybe future for South Africa or the wine industry or anything you'd like to share?
Well, you know, I think we're a resourceful country. You know, there's so many resources here. They just be allowed, if you think during the war, you know, when we were up in Namibia, the wonderful weapons that we created and everything, you know, when the Simon Stouter Accord was stopped and stuff like that. You know, we were at one stage the only country outside of Germany, even in isolation, building Mercedes-Benz and Audis and BMWs. And for a country that's that resourceful, to be able to say we don't want those resources, man, can these politicians just catch a wake up? You know, because I think the following generation, I think they've got to take the country forward, and hopefully they will. And I think there's good people all around. And to you, for doing good work for South Africa, I would like to thank you. And you're always welcome here at Welbedacht.
Well, thank you.
And maybe I'll bump you one day in America.
Possibly, since you get to the States, more than most of my viewers do, that's for sure. Bye-bye, Duncan.
Plaisir.
Okay. Now, see, when I say plaisir, people always say you sound like you're German. Folks, that's it here from Welbedacht. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with the Springbok legend and part of a father-son duo that plays Springbok. Maybe we can get the other Schalk Burger on the channel sometime. I've actually met him. I met him in Philadelphia when he came to play for Saracens. It was against Newcastle. And Schalk played about 50 or 60 minutes a game. He sat down, and I saw him sitting on the bench. I kind of wandered, hey, Schalk, can we do a selfie? Yeah, sure. And so that was the extent of my meeting him.
Okay.
Seems like a nice guy. His dad is obviously a nice guy too. Thanks a lot, folks. We're going to wrap it up here. Be sure to give us a like, share this with your friends, and let them know all about it. And now, a couple hours from now, it's Steve Hofmeyer here at Welbedacht for his concert. I suspect he'll probably do some Neil Diamond tonight. We'll see. Cheers, everybody. Oops.
What
Extra shots.
I wish I haven't got. I've ever would like to have given you one of the books that I published.